Minister Lipenga, you've come to office in Malawi at a difficult time for the economy.
That's right.
Probably the worst of circumstances for a Minister of Finance.
That's right.
To inherit. And so my question is, how, in trying to stabilize your economic situation, have you been weighting the different sectoral priorities? So, for example, health, education, all of the many other areas that demand state resources. How do you create the equilibrium between them?
Yeah, you're right. I assumed this position at a particularly difficult time when there was really need for us to revisit the foreign exchange regime and stabilize the economy somehow. And what we needed to do was, when we looked at what has happened in other countries that have been faced with this kind of challenge have focused on one thing. After devaluation, you then put measures together, both monetary and fiscal, to combat inflation. And in order to succeed, it appears, as we have seen in the experience of other countries, in order to succeed in a reasonable length of time, you really have to under-execute in other areas. In other words, pretty much put, for instance, social spending on hold and explain to the public, if you can, that certain things will have to wait. And exactly, yes, while you sort out the mess. And you also have to forget about growth. So the private sector, again, has to be put on hold, in a sense. We looked at our situation and found that that wasn't going to be the right way to approach it in the Malawi context. And so what we settled for was a policy mix that indeed sought to deal with inflation, with all the tightening that goes with that, both monetary and fiscal, but at the same time allow for a measure of growth as well, and again have an element of social spending. The social spending had to come in because there was need to have in place measures to mitigate against the negative but inevitable impact of the reforms that we were implementing. And in that particular regard, we worked very closely with development partners, including the World Bank, African Development Bank, and other bilateral partners, to basically upscale existing social protection measures, such as the fertilizer subsidy program that I've kept referring to, and measures to make sure that drugs are available in the hospitals, some cash transfer arrangements, and also some public works arrangements. Public works where people work on roads and other, public works, and receive money which they use to buy the heavily subsidized fertilizer. So the various parts of the package are somehow linked. It has worked, but of course it has meant for a rather slow process in terms of combating inflation. And even now, as I am speaking, there is a complaint from the public that perhaps the reforms are not really yielding the intended results. We are confident that eventually this package will indeed deliver. But clearly, because we have combined the 3 or 4 elements within this, it means that we couldn't have moved as fast. It would have meant for further tightening as well, which would have been much more harmful.
Right.
Yeah.
One of your considerations in such a crisis inevitably must be the impact on political stability. So inflation, clearly is something that impacts everybody. But increasingly across countries, we see public expectations regarding service delivery. And so my question is, how do you ensure that the services are delivered?
That's a very important point. The famous saying by Bill Clinton was that is the economy stupid?
Yes.
But in fact, in our context, in many places in Africa, including Malawi, I would say it's the politics stupid. Because very often you see instances where political leaders avoid making really necessary economic decisions which are obvious to everybody because they are afraid of the political consequences. And that is partly the reason why the Malawi kwacha, our currency, was overvalued for a very, very long time. I took over from my predecessor who had tried for a long time to persuade the then president about the need for devaluing the currency. I mean, everybody could see that there was the economy has pretty much migrated from the formal to the informal. Yeah. And not a single company, not a single trader was determining their prices according to the officially quoted rate for the dollar. I mean, it was obvious to everybody. Yeah. But obviously there were political considerations. So when you have an overvalued currency like that, you do have a degree, a level of stability, but it is stability built on sand. And that's what, I mean, if we had put off that decision for even a day longer back in 2012, the economy would have simply just collapsed. So you try to explain these things to the public. In fact, what happened in the Malawi case is that we were actually pretty much implementing decisions that the people were demanding. People were demanding that something be done. The kwacha, our currency, had already devalued itself, as I said. So it is a question of just unifying the two rates, as it were. And we knew, of course, that would also result in prices increasing, particularly when we adopted the automatic determination of fuel prices. That really sent prices spiraling, not just in fuel, but also other areas that are related. What happened, though, is that prior to the devaluation of the kwacha and all the other related reforms in the foreign exchange regime, there were long queues of vehicles looking for fuel in Malawi. Fuel was not available at all for over a period of 2 years. And people had to queue, or you start to buy fuel from the black market, often mixed with all sorts of other ingredients, and that will end up damaging vehicles and so on and so forth. And immediately after the devaluation, literally almost overnight, the queues disappeared. It goes to show you that when the price is right, the dollar will come in. So overnight, the queues disappeared and fuel became available. Okay, after a few months, you had some reappearance of queues, but that was just a reminder of how delicate the situation still was. And now, of course, the complaint is different. The fuel is available, abundantly available, but now the people are saying, well, but the price is too high. So you can't win, but we do believe that over a period of time, the situation will stabilize. And at the moment, we really are focusing on freedom. Because you see, the problem we had in Malawi, by the way, had to do with bad relations that we had both with the IMF, but also our development partners. And these problems had to do with two categories of explanations. One was to do with political governance, the violation of human rights, the lack of press freedom, and so on and so forth. In other words, Malawians were unhappy with that, and donors, in reflecting that dissatisfaction, decided, precisely. And then our failure to make the right decisions in terms of economic governance also made it became impossible for us to reach an agreement with the IMF. And agreement with the IMF was crucial, not because of the obviously important financial resources that are made available, but also because agreement with a program with the IMF sends a signal to partners, including the private sector, both at home and abroad, that the economy is being managed according to internationally accepted macroeconomic principles. So freedom also was crucial in terms of economic governance. There had been too many controls before that, and that's what hadn't worked. And now with the introduction of the freedoms, it means that the dollar is available and so on and so on. But we still have problems, of course, because we really do not have sufficient reserves for us to be able to perhaps exercise a degree of control. Because what we did was to devalue, but also to float the currency. And that combination, well, I mean, we know it will eventually do the trick, but it's really causing it's really, and it's causing a lot of unhappiness, I must say, yeah.
I'm sure you wake up every morning with a headache.
For sure, for sure. Because you look, I mean, our economy depends on agriculture.
Yes.
And in agriculture, also there is heavy dependence on tobacco.
Yeah.
So the tobacco season is always looked forward to.
Yeah.
Now I can tell you that never in the economic history of Malawi has the tobacco season been looked forward to the way it has been this year, because everybody is, yeah, that's right. And the rains, of course, and maize prices also went up. Now this is a harvest season, so we expect that prices will dampen. And in fact, inflation in Malawi is driven mostly by food prices, and that means maize prices. So when the harvest season comes in, it becomes the season of some hope, and then you have the lean season. So my ambition right now, as Minister of Finance, working with my team, is to see if we can address the structural problems of the economy and, as it were, kill the lean season. There will be a lean season from October, November. That's always there. It's given. But we think that maybe with a little more imagination, we can find in ways in which we can kill that lean season. And that means perhaps producing 2 crops in agriculture, for instance, which is the president is championing at this very moment, and looking at other ways of managing the economy. Yeah.
Well, Minister, you have a big task. I wish you luck.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's been a pleasure coming here. Thank you.